Welcome back to my channel for a short Hasselblad X2D Mark II episode. And one of my habits, as most of you will know, whenever I get a new camera, I will take it out in the field and shoot long exposures at night. And that's what I did with this camera lens combination. Currently mounted is the 20-35 E lens. There is no E engraved here, and there are only two lenses in the Hasselblad lineup currently for the X system and the V system, which have an E, and E stands for exclusive, and it's only the 20-35 and the new 35-100 millimeter zoom lenses. And I was taking the camera out with that lens here in the field, shooting it, enjoying it. I want to show my sample images and also provide a very important hint for you, which you very likely will appreciate because that will avoid mistakes in your shooting at night. If you have not yet subscribed to my channel, please do so, subscribe, hit the notification bell, support my work. Many thanks for that. All right, shooting long exposures. That means I had the camera mounted on a tripod and I actually went even beyond 10 minutes. And there are certain things to note which I will point out when we look into the sample images. But in terms of settings of the camera, I was basically shooting with an ISO of 50. And here is the ISO button. You go to 50. Why did I do that? Because the base ISO for the X2D Mark II changed from formerly 64 on the Mark I to 50 on the Mark II. And in order to get the cleanest signal of the sensor, no enhancement, no strengthening, no nothing, I did shoot with an ISO of 50. In terms of focus, I went for landscape. I was shooting in the Swiss mountains for autofocus single. And I was also switching off subject detection. It's not necessary to do that for landscape photography. And the third very quick point I want to make is I actually did shoot the camera first in autofocus mode. So here in autofocus single, and then I switched to manual focus. And I have a very short clip I will show in the course of the video why I did it. And I think that will be surprising news for you. And is something you need to take into account if you shoot at pitch black night. This is an excellent landscape lens. I don't think I have a fully fledged review of the XCD 20-35 E lens on my channel. And if you want to see that, then please drop me a comment. I'm happy to provide one of my usual lens reviews where I just focus on the lens and explain you everything you need to know about specifications, shooting experience, and image quality, of course. Actually, before going into the sample images, which is the main purpose of this video to show you what you can achieve with this camera lens combination, let's quickly also look into one important setting. If I'm shooting landscape at night on a tripod, I go into fully manual mode. And you see here on the A, I'm currently in aperture priority. In order to change that, you go here and press the M button, and then you go here to fully manual mode. That's what you need to do. And then don't be scared if you go here. Let's say I have currently here on the rear control wheel my shutter speed. And if I start to make exposures longer, then you reach after 1 second, all of a sudden, the bulb mode. And if you're not experienced with Hasselblad X cameras or V cameras, you might think, oh my gosh, I have only 1 second exposures available. And then I'm in bulb mode, which means as long as I press and hold the shutter button, I will basically take exposure. And if I release it, it will stop taking exposure. And that's not the case. After the bulb mode, there is the T mode. And after the T mode, you can start to make your shutter speed slower and slower and slower, and your exposure time longer and longer and longer. And the Hasselblad X2D was already, and the X2D Mark II is no exception here, made for long exposures. Look at that. You get very quickly here to 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 6 minutes. I was actually going beyond 10 minutes in one shot, which I'm going to show you. And the results are really good, with 2 caveats I'm going to discuss in the course of the video, of course. So that's very important to bear in mind. You typically go into manual mode. Now here in the studio, I prefer to be in aperture priority, so I get always the correct exposure. But besides the base ISO of 50 as a shooting parameter, that's very important. Now, coming back to autofocus. As I said, I was first in autofocus single and I was in spot. And in this way achieving some really good exposures. But then something strange happened. It was really pitch black night And all of a sudden, my autofocus, which worked very well at the beginning at night, started to no longer hit the nail. Let me play this very short clip, and I apologize. This clip is very, very hard to watch because there is flickering which comes from my iPhone, which I had in one hand. With the right hand side hand, I was actually operating the camera. The clip is really not pretty, but the insight is really important. So please be patient, stay with me, and let's watch that clip and then quickly discuss. I want to show you guys something interesting. And I'm holding now my iPhone 16 Pro Max with one hand, operating the camera with the other hand. So it's a bit shaky, but you will forgive me if you see what I'm going to show you. Let's go here. Let's go from manual focus here. Sorry, I'm switching, see. Let's go from manual focus to autofocus single. And let's focus. So we pick a white spot where the focus field is sitting and we focus. Now it's green and there's the confirmation beep. Listen to that again. Well, you can't hear it because I have noise cancellation on, but you will see that the focus field turns green. And now I switch back without touching the lens into manual focus. You see what happens here? This is not focusing at infinity as it should. So be careful if you do long exposures at night. I found out very quickly that I'm better off with manual focus because the focus, which should be at infinity at this point in time, the way I focused at the far horizon on the lights, should actually sit here on the right-hand side corner, but it sits before. And actually the image will also be very fuzzy and blurry if I shoot it now. So I switched in my shooting to manual focus, and then I adjusted the focus on the focus ring. Watch here. So here I go just to the far, and don't overdo it. Go slowly until you reach the very right-hand side corner and then stop there. Don't overturn it because then it might get blurry again. This is the right focus, and now the image will be sharp and will look in the way I want it to look. So what you just saw in this clip is very important, right? You think you can rely on autofocus single in this case, because we talk about landscape on a tripod. But if you see on the distance scale, and you can go there actually by pressing these buttons here. So here you can toggle through the different display representations. And you see here, if I'm starting to focus now, that little indicator on the distance scale starts to move. And you saw that in the clip. And the autofocus was just always placing, although I did actually focus at the horizon, this little indicator here significantly before infinity, which made all images blurry and not sharp at all. So I really had to switch into manual focusing mode, which you saw in the video, and adjust the focus and make sure that it is sitting at the very right-hand side of this distance scale. And then it's also important, let's quickly do that. Let me repeat what you saw in that shaky clip here. Let's go to manual focus. And if I now turn the focus ring here, and you saw in the clip, the focus peaking was kicking in, but the images actually turned out to be blurry. You can still rotate that focus ring, even if the indicator is sitting directly below the infinity sign. But then you're overdoing it. It's almost like overturning it. Make sure you slowly turn the focus ring here until you just read that very right-hand side of the distance scale. And that's it. Take your hands off. Don't try to overdo it, because that might again introduce some blurriness in your images. A second topic which I will show in the sample images is the topic of hot pixels. If you shoot with any camera, it doesn't really matter what brand, what sensor size, what have you. If you shoot with a camera for a longer time, longer exposures, the sensor will get very hot, and naturally, by the laws of physics, hot pixels will start to occur in your images. And in Lightroom, you can correct them manually with the remove tool, but there are better ways to correct it. And this is a longer topic, and I've spoken about hot pixels repeatedly on my channel, but with this new camera, I think it's maybe worthwhile to refresh these videos and combine them into one to show you clever and smart solutions how you can deal with hot pixels and giving you the full background. It will be too long for this video. I will make a separate video, promise it will come in the next days, but it's important for you to watch, because otherwise your life will get very miserable if you have a very nice night shot, night photography, but you have a couple of hundred hot pixels on that image and need to remove them manually. That will take you a lot of time and is super annoying. So stay tuned. Don't miss that video, which will come in the next days. And I will give you a full download of how to deal with hot pixels. But don't get me wrong, hot pixels are totally normal. There is nothing wrong with that camera. If I would have done the same exercise, shooting up to 10 minutes with a Leica camera, Nikon camera, Sony camera, Fuji camera, what have you, you would have the same phenomenon. Hot pixels will occur in the image. And if there are a lot of hot pixels, you will actually not enjoy your post-processing. Believe me, and I show you one example in the sample images. And now let's go into these images. I want to show it to you because I think it's absolutely breathtaking how this camera captures at night landscape. I was in the middle of the Swiss mountains. I had recorded a couple of clips to show you the environment, but it was so dark that even my iPhone with its computational photography only produced a very pixel heavy and not nice video. So I will not show it to you and just leave you with that statement that I did shoot in the Swiss mountains, and you will see immediately in the sample images that I had a pretty nice scene in front of me. So here's the first image, the first scene, and I made this a 16:9 aspect ratio because I had too much foreground from the location where I was standing with my tripod. And this is a pretty nice image, in particular when I show you in a moment how this actually looked before post-processing. If I crop in here by 100%, you see nothing but goodness. Lots of light trails along these roads here. It's a 128-second exposure shot at f5.6. So stop down, fair amount, and base ISO of 50. And this is nothing but cool. Look at that. The light trails along these roads here, the tiny little farmhouses, the details you get. Very, very sharp, very crisp image, and it looks really, really good. If you want to see how this looked before post-processing, have a look here. Left-hand side is before, right-hand side is after. And you get an idea here how dark it really was. There was only residual light in the sky, but even at 128 seconds, everything in the foreground, the city lights, the streets, the light trails, the mountains, it's basically dark. And in post-processing, correcting by a few stops here in Lightroom, I could actually create this image here, which looks, and I hope you agree, pretty cool. Look at the light trails here in the mountains. Very nice. No noise, of course. This is base ISO of 50. And the stars, based on 128 seconds in that night sky, of course, they trailed. So you see here star trails. And by the way, you get a first idea about hot pixels in that image. Here is one, here is one, here is one, here's another one, here's another one. I come back to this topic in a couple of minutes. But very nice image, and before and after, very impressive, gives you a rough first idea about the super high dynamic range, which is more than 15 full stops according to Hasselblad, that camera is providing here. Absolutely fabulous. So this image here was shot at 20mm on a 20-35 E lens. The next one I want to show was shot at 35mm. Is this one here, and this is now a 645 second exposure, so this is more than 10 minutes of exposure time. And of course, accordingly, we get much longer star trails here, and we also get more hot pixels. Here is one, for instance, but if you look into the mountains, you see a bunch of them. I don't know if you can see them on YouTube, but here is one, here is one, here is one, here is one, and so on. And I'll show you another picture later where I was shooting later in time in that evening where I had lots of hot pixels. And as I said, there will be a dedicated video on that. Don't panic. If you see that, an image is never lost because of hot pixels. There are very smart ways to remove them in one shot, totally automatic ways. And I'll give you that video in a few days so you learn how to do that if you not already have your own technique to overcome it. But again, a very nice image. Of course, we have now a lot of overblown highlights here, but still a lot of detail in the village here in the valley. Look at that. Very sharp, very crisp, looks really good. Again, we have these tiny little farmhouses here. You even see the structure of the grass here. It's absolutely amazing what you can do. And more than 10 seconds exposure, no problem for the X2D Mark II. You will capture the scene in a very nice way. I personally like the 35mm perspective a bit more even on that lens than the 20mm lens, but both images I think are pretty nice. Here now an example of a 323 second exposure, again at f5.6, ISO 50, but 323 seconds. And later that evening, when my camera sensor already was not only warm, but very likely very hot. And you see all the markers here, they indicate you where if I cropped them by 100%, I found hot pixels. And I don't have to tell you, right? If you have to do this manual work in Lightroom, you will get crazy very, very quickly. And that's why I'm saying there are more smart ways to deal with it. Here I wanted to show you what it takes. If you shoot 10 exposures, and for each of these 10 exposures, after shooting for a while, because the sensor is hot, you have naturally occurring a lot of hot pixels, and doing this post-processing work is just super annoying. So follow my next video, I will show you how to do this better, but this is an example how it looks like if you do it manually. All right, that's the last image I wanted to show because I like it a lot. We had a moon which was more than half full, and this is a 64 second exposure. Of course, the moonlight is blown out here, f5.6 again, and I just wanted to walk you through that image. Look at that barn here. How nice is that? Following the light trails here along the roads, you see one coming here, which I like. Look at that light trail, 64 seconds, very nice. Look at the houses here, the sharpness, the colors, the contrast, micro contrast. Of course, some highlights are blown out. That's what it is. I can't change that if I go for 64 seconds. Look at the mountains here. Very nice. Of course, the stars are trailing again because 64 seconds is a long exposure. I also had here some hot pixels, but I removed them, most of them at least. Here in the mountains, you still see a few of them. With the technology I'm going to provide in one of the next videos, you will see how to remove it. Look at the forest here. So much detail at ISO 464 seconds. Very nice. I stop with sample images here and conclude the video now. All right, that's it. That's all I wanted to say and show. I hope you liked the images. I think this is a camera which is made for night photography, long exposures, fantastic sensor. As I said, there will be a subsequent video very soon where I talk about how to deal with hot pixels, which is a totally natural phenomenon if you shoot extended times with a digital camera because the sensor becomes hot. And I hope you also liked my little tips and tricks session on making sure you focus manually to be on the safe side if you do landscape in pitch black night on a tripod. If you liked that video, don't forget to drop me a thumbs up. Stay tuned on my channel. There's always more to come. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and healthy. And of course, peace out.